Thank you for coming to today's session on emerging developers and capacity building. We're going to talk about programs and partnerships. I'm Carrie Williams. I'm the nonprofit and community outreach lead at the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. And I'm going to ask my panelists to join me on stage now as I do the introductions. Today's panelists come from a variety of sectors of our industry. We're going to have two capacity building programs talk to us. Jess Blanche from Enterprise Community Partners and AJ Kari from LISC. You guys want to come up and arrange yourselves on these chairs? We're also going to have two partnerships between sort of more experienced and emerging developers. We have Chauncey Jones from Take Up the Cause and Jonathan Malahan from Catholic Charities of Eastern Washington. And we also have Manzoor Kamara from the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle with Connor Hansen from SRM Developers. I don't have my slideshow clicker, so let's see. Really hard, okay. There we go. There's our panelists. Thank you for participating today. We are going to try to get through this session lightning fast. We have 50 minutes. We might keep you a little bit over if there's a good discussion going on, and you can join your lunch a little late. I have also been advised to make an announcement that for folks who want to continue a conversation about sort of place-based development, community-based development at lunch, there's kind of a makeshift table tent that will go on one of the tables that says, "I love CDCs." They're spearheading that from the session next door, but we might have some overlap in this room about folks who want to talk about that stuff. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to do just a brief bit of context setting. Over the past few years, public funding agencies in particular have really placed an emphasis on overcoming historic barriers placed in the paths of people of color who would like to join the development industry, and also emphasis placed on projects that are by and for community. We collectively feel like this is going to create a better experience for residents in our buildings. In 2021, the Washington State Housing Finance Commission reset our 4% tax credit and bond policy to incentivize organizations that have been unable to achieve their development dreams in the past, with a couple of different points categories, one for overcoming these historic barriers for people of color, and the other for creating projects that are by and for the community. And we offer a spectrum of points for participation that incentivize everything from long-term ownership to just financial benefits for community-based organizations who are participating, to a really robust potential tenant engagement to try to get the voices of the residents into the development of these buildings. And we've had a fair amount of success. We're going to hear from two partnerships today that have both taken advantage of these incentives. But first we're going to start with what is capacity building. We've talked a lot about, like, we're opening this door now to try to right some wrongs from the past, to try to better balance the diversity amongst our development community. But that door is 60 feet off the ground, and we are also in conversations about the scaffolding that needs to happen in order to get to the door in the first place. And we talk about capacity building a lot. It's kind of a buzzword. Oh, everyone needs more capacity building. What are we talking about? Are we talking about technical assistance? Are we talking about money? Are we talking about relationships? Are we talking about exchange of knowledge? All of these things are kind of on the menu. So I really want to get into today some of the weeds about what we are saying when we're talking about capacity building. We have a couple of programs, as I mentioned, but we also have partnerships for kind of knowledge exchange among partners who have different levels of expertise and different areas of expertise. So we're going to start with Jess Blanche from Enterprise Community Partners. She can introduce herself. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're going to start with AJ.
Okay.
We're going to start with AJ from LISC. We're going to have 5 minutes for each of you to talk about kind of your programs, and then we'll move to the partnerships.
Okay, sounds good. I'll try to go fast to make more room for the partnerships. So I'm AJ Kari, Senior Program Officer at LISC Puget Sound. I missed last year, so it's exciting to see old friends, new friends. Excited to spend some time with everybody this week. Thanks for coming to this. Very quickly, for those that don't know LISC, our mission is to forge resilient and inclusive communities of opportunity that make great places to live, work, do business, and raise your families. We are a national CDFI, so that means we do lending. We consist of various offices across the country, Puget Sound being one of them. In addition to lending, we build community capacity, provide fund management for impact investment. Housing is one of our major key areas. We also do economic development, small business development, wealth building. So Housing Equity Accelerator is a Puget Sound signature program, but we do so many different things. I do want to give a shout out to Amazon, though. They are our lead partner, lead funder for this program. They're an exceptional and such a supportive partner, so we're really just grateful for that partnership. So I'll get into the objectives here on the program, why this program is so important to us. First and foremost, to address the housing crisis, we have to build housing units, period. Second, it's imperative that we invest in community-led development. That's the most direct and authentic way to inform how housing and services impact our community. Third, we all know real estate development and the affordable housing industry, they're severely lacking in diversity, so this helps with that. Fourth, it's imperative that we build wealth in communities impacted by generational lack of access to capital and opportunity. And fifth, through this work, we work to understand what the barriers are with emerging developers of color and can advocate for effective change. And this is kind of what gets to what you were saying, Carrie, like how do we do this work? What makes, and you mentioned a lot of those menu items, so I'll go through some of these here. We provide content, knowledge, delivery on real estate and business development, in-depth technical assistance, and it's really focused, it's a holistic approach. We focus not just on projects, but on the organization. So we see these as accelerating their projects, accelerating the growth of their organization so they can continue to do more housing. Connections is a key component. We provide exposure to a diverse network of professionals as speakers, panelists, and through networking events. And this leads to other connections, other resources, other potential partnerships and opportunities that we can layer on to the fellows. And then capital is critical in all of this. We provide loans and grants to support the capacity building of the organization and delivery of units. I think what I'd like to emphasize, though, what sets this program apart is it's providing the right support at the right time. I like to say it's not just a program, but this is a long-term investment in an ongoing partnership beyond just one project. So we like to see the developers come back as they scale their organizations, scale their projects, come back and maybe there's different resources that apply to them as they grow. And so I'll close, there's a quick slide on impacts. And rather than reading through the numbers, I'll just highlight, we had our inaugural cohort in 2022. We launched our current cohort, our second cohort in March this year. We're serving more than 30 emerging developers. Many of them are here today. So maybe stand up or raise your hand really quick and folks can say hi, those that are in the room. I see Nisha there too. So please say hi to them. And I'll just share a couple quick success stories. We had A&D Construction, Quality Construction, CG Real Estate. They met from the first in the first cohort, and they formed a JV to work on a 20-unit together in Tacoma. So that's a big step, getting into that joint venture partnership. Alpha Sharp came into the program. He had done just a few 20 units, and now since the program, he's doubled his staff and is now doing a 120-unit project in Tacoma. He was even featured in DC at an Urban Institute panel highlighting developers of color. So that just, seeing that growth, that trajectory, I'm super proud to work with these developers. It's a privilege to work with them and just be part of their journey and their growth. It's really an impactful program just in terms of the investment in time, in capital. We're building these individual developers so that we can strengthen an overall ecosystem. So I'm happy to talk about the program further. and answer questions whenever it's the right time.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Blanche with Enterprise Community Partners. We are a national nonprofit that is pretty similar to LISC. So I'll save you the description of all the things that we do too, because you could probably just ×2 on what LISC does. But our sort of main pillars are to expand the supply of affordable housing across the United States, advance racial equity, and build resilience and economic mobility in our communities. And one of the ways that Enterprise has been doing that has been working with community-based organizations, and specifically faith-based organizations, to help them understand affordable housing as an opportunity to repurpose underutilized property and create a new mission and ministry aligned way to serve the community. We know faith-based communities have been housing the poor for thousands of years. And so one of the ways that we think of the opportunity to partner with faith-based organizations is really to help expand their capacity to understand what it means to partner in developing affordable housing. And we're now expanding that to be to train our partners in the community, so community-based organizations right now in King County and soon to be across Washington. And so up on the slide here is really kind of the curriculum overview. Our goal with these trainings is not necessarily to create developers out of every single community-based organization, but really to help folks understand kind of the constellation of ways that they can be involved, whether that's as a property owner that becomes part of a deal, whether that's as a service provider. And we're really looking at the opportunity to provide training and technical assistance that expands their capacity and understanding in that way. Oh, my slide went away. Can I have a slide back? Thanks. So we go through 5 modules that are really kind of soup to nuts, but high level. So understanding what is affordable housing, sometimes helping people just understand what we mean when we say affordable housing, what it means to look at different ways to develop, and then the process of development itself, right? What it takes to get through pre-development, financially, partnership-wise, and then what it takes to get through the design and construction process, the structuring of the deal, right? Understanding all of the very complex ways that affordable housing is financed. And then, long term, we know that affordable housing is a long-term commitment, and there's risks involved in addition to the rewards and the responsibilities of serving some of our most vulnerable community members. So we really try to help people understand what goes into the operations side. So right now, we're working with 10 organizations through King County that have been involved in the equitable development work. And then we've worked with probably 25 faith-based organizations across Puget Sound, for our faith-based development initiative. And we have a number of projects that are exciting moving forward, and also a bunch that you public funders out there probably saw in your applications that came in last week. So we're looking forward to seeing those partnerships flourish.
Thank you, Jess. I think we'll move now to our first of the 2 partnerships. Chauncey Jones and Jonathan Malahan are going to talk about their relationship so far and some lessons that they've learned.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? Y'all good out there? I see you in the back, so when this is an interactive thing when it's my turn, so we gonna connect, because we fam out here, right? So I'm Chauncey Jones. Man, all right, I got the specific title. You can see all, I guess you don't see all that. So what I like to say I am is a beloved community developer. And what I mean by that is going back to the vision of Dr. King and the beloved community where all of us can live together and flourish together, right? And I know that that development and that dream has never manifested, and it's been deferred for so many people that look like me. And so I have a platform which then gives me the obligation to make sure that I'm not the only in Eastern Washington. I'm here in Spokane. And we know what the numbers are. Those of you who are in here are intelligent enough that you've read how much affordable housing we need over the next 20 years. And so when we have someone as strong as the organization to my left, and Jonathan can tell you about that, it's going to take collaboration. And I said this yesterday in the panel that I was on. It's collaboration over competition, right? Marty, my guy, says a thing, if we put the W in front of ego and see how far we go, we can go far. So let me talk to you a little bit about Take Up the Cause and how far we've gone. 4 years ago, Take Up the Cause did not exist, okay? It was an organization that was started with a conversation with me and a couple of family members, and then one of the true pillars in the Spokane community by the name of Sandy Williams reached out to me and said, Chauncey, so we know a lot of times when we sit down and have lunch, Sandy and I, if we had food there, our arguments would be muted by the food, right? So we would always go into a black-owned restaurant and discuss our black business. And she says, we need someone who looks like us in the nonprofit affordable housing space. And I am previously and still am in the for-profit as well. And I told her I'm good. Sandy, I have no desire to be in nonprofit. I heard, don't nonprofits not make money? And she says, well, you know, Rolex is under a nonprofit, technically. I was like, oh, well, I'm in. So having that conversation and just to see how far things can go in a 4-year span, we went from being this conceptual idea, and through collaboration, we now have 92 units of affordable housing, soon to be 96 units of yeah, you better clap it up. Yeah, we ain't at the point where we normalize greatness. We clap it up when we hear them numbers every time, right? So 96 units of affordable housing, along with the program that has been developed with me and 6 other phenomenal organizations called Black Homeownership Spokane. So my thing has always been the upward mobility, right? And we know there's always levels. Everybody say levels. There's levels to it, right? If we start here, someone who is unhoused, we want to get them safe, right? Get them to a place, because we all agree that we deserve safe shelter, right? Okay, that should be a right? Anyway, so there's that step. And then you want to get into being able to be a responsible renter. And a news flash for people, granite countertops doesn't erase generational trauma. It's crazy, right? So knowing that it's going to take housing and services, and then being able to come from a position of power again. And when we have these collaborative, now we're a CBO. Again, I didn't even know what that was until we was like, hey, you're going to be a community-based organization. Oh, bet. So not only are we a community-based organization, but we're also now a CHODO, which is a community housing development organization. Did I say that right, Bessie? Is that what we are now? So now we're that as well. And all those acronyms aside, again, building this beloved community is so near and dear. And now being able to push those dreams and Take Up the Cause is we're not a faith-based organization, but it comes from Scripture. And I'm gonna leave you with this part of what we do. So the first thing, it says learn, right? Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause for the widow, and plead the case of the fatherless. So anytime we get down on that mission and the day gets daunting, we refer to that. And the why has to be bigger than the why not. So that's what Take Up the Cause is about.
Chauncey, I'm regretting that you went first.
I told you,
yeah. So we're going to roll out the bureaucrat. So Catholic Charities Eastern Washington, I'm Jonathan Mallahan, Chief Housing Officer for Catholic Charities Eastern Washington. We have 3,000 units of affordable housing across 67 affordable housing communities here in Washington State. So we're a larger, developer, housing operator, and social service organization. Our mission is to feed the hungry, heal the hurt, and to welcome the stranger. One of the primary ways we do that is through creating safe, affordable housing communities for people to thrive and achieve their goals. But you're not here to talk about Catholic Charities today. I want to talk about the partnership that we've been able to build and how it benefits all of us and helps us achieve our mission even more effectively. We know that there are barriers between certain groups of people and any institution that is going to be a large Catholic affiliated institution. We cannot meet all the need as much as we desire to do that. We know that we have to build capacity and partner to do that. And Chauncey has shown us, we've learned a lot in this as how to do that effectively. So we started with, hey, let's see what doors we can open, what capacity we can lend. We came at this not from we want to do a project with Chauncey. We came at this with, we want to provide our capacity, our resources, access to our knowledge, and our staff have 100 years of experience collectively on our leadership team for affordable housing. We want to be a resource there to help support the goals of Chauncey's organization. And then as we had some early wins, and you can see up here some of those projects we worked on, we were able to evolve that partnership as well, I think we can do some more. I think we can learn together and get even better at this. And so Chauncey has been working with Catholic Charities to help inform our projects and listen deeply to residents in our housing communities as we develop new projects, and to say, well, have you thought of this? Or did you really know we're hearing this from your residents? Or did you see that barrier in your process for application? And we have benefited greatly because Chauncey can enter into these conversations and hold really frank, direct conversations that maybe when there's a power dynamic between Catholic Charities, owner, operator of your home here, asking you, hey, tell us how we could do better, people may not approach that conversation with a lot of openness and comfort. There's absolutely a barrier there. So one of the great ways that we've begun to improve our own operations is by listening and having Chauncey help us do that. But I'll pause. I would just call out, we've got a couple of successes here, but the next step is for us to work to develop a project that is a buy and for project in our community that would be mixed use housing community with services on the ground level that are specific. You think of a Maji Rising, which is another partnership that we have, is a FQHC that would provide healthcare services that specifically take into account differently colored skin and the services that are required there. That is not something, not to impugn anyone in Spokane, that's not something that's available broadly in the Spokane market. And so we're trying to build communities that meet multiple layers of needs, and we know that we accomplish that through partnerships like the partnership we've been able to build. So. Thank
you both so much. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next one. Mansour, you were starting?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Mansour Kamara. I'm with the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. For those of you who do not know, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle is part of the national affiliate group called the National Urban League, which was founded in 1910, and the Urban League of Seattle was founded in 1930. Housing is one of the main integral component of our mission. So we've been providing housing-related services since our inception. We've been running shelters, transitional housing, and we actually developed our first LIHTC deal back in 2006. That is a 36-unit apartment complex, and it also housed the Northwest African American Museum. So we did not do any development from 2006 to 2021, I would say. So we were in conversations with our board. The leadership and the board were in conversation to basically identify a permanent office location of the organization. So during that conversations with the board, the CEO was also having conversations with Office of Housing, and for some reason, we were connected with SRM during that process. So in 2022, September 2022, we closed on a deal called the Blueprint Portfolio, which comprises of 354 unit affordable housing. Basically, they were market units that were already developed, and we just converted them to affordable housing. 90% of those are 50 to 60% AMI, and 10% is 80% AMI. So as you can imagine, that's a big project for a nonprofit that hasn't done developments for almost 20 years, I would say. So what I wanted to highlight is that with that first deal as a nonprofit, one of the most important aspects is basically partnering with an organization and individuals that have passion for the work, because we want to make sure that we serve the community to the best of our ability. The second thing is that the relationship has to be built on trust. So with that first deal, the ownership is 50% ownership for each partner, SRM having 50% and ULMS having 50%. So that has to be based on trust. And I also wanted to highlight that capacity building for a nonprofit emerging developer is very important, because you need people who are experts in the area to be able to make the right decisions for the nonprofit, because the for-profit partner already has those individuals. So as a result of the partnership, we were able to hire an additional person on our team, an asset manager, and SRM also hired an asset manager on their team. We then did another deal with SRM, which is the Altair transaction, which comprises of 207 units affordable housing in North Seattle. So we broke ground in January 2024, and I think it's supposed to be completed by March 2026. We are also, SRM is our pre-development contractor for our Empowerment Center, which is gonna have 165 affordable housing units. It's also gonna have an office space, a daycare, coffee shop, and it's basically gonna be, it's also gonna have an incubator center, but it's basically gonna be our community center as well. So I think that's it.
I forgot to mention too, Monsour's in the current cohort. I forgot to mention that too. So it's been great just being part of your amazing growth trajectory. So thank you. Thanks.
Mansour covered a lot, and so I just feel, first of all, privileged to be on the stage today. Privileged to be in a partnership with the Urban League. They're an amazing partner. But maybe to kind of share my perspective, and I also want to say the Empowerment Center is 45% family-sized units, which is something we're really proud of. But so I've been doing affordable housing for 15 years, 13 of which I was working at a nonprofit in Southeast Seattle called Mount Baker Housing Association. And I owe all my success to that organization to let me learn the business. I went to school not to learn about affordable housing, because that didn't exist, and that's, I think, one of the problems in our industry, and I think a tip of the hat to what you two are doing to create an environment to learn the business, because that just doesn't exist. So I out of college, I was a broker of apartment buildings. The Great Recession happened, didn't really like it, and wanted to get into the development side, and found my way to Mount Baker Housing. And I just learned on the job. I surrounded myself with a lot of smart people. Brian Lloyd with Beacon Development was a big, he taught me, showed me a lot of the ropes. And so my approach to this is kind of to pay it forward to folks like the Urban League and other nonprofit partners we have. There is no good way to learn the business other than just getting thrown into the fire. And I think there's a lot of benefits that we bring to groups like the Urban League that maybe they'd just the experience that our organization has to lend to the Urban League, but also just from the financial and risk indemnification standpoint. Like I said, I was working a nonprofit for a while, and yes, nonprofits make money, but maybe not tons of money, and so I don't have a lot of assets to risk for these deals that we have to guarantee. Altair, for example, the 207-unit deal we closed in North Seattle, that required a $3 million liquidity guarantee or covenant, and I don't have $3 million sitting in the bank, and so I needed partners to bring into the deal to do that. And so I bring in those partners, and then I help share that with the Urban League to get the deal out of the ground. And I think that's just a very important element to these deals. They're big dollars. There's big risk, and it really takes a village to get these projects out of the ground. And so that's kind of how our relationship is working, is really transferring and spreading all that around. I also kind of joke with the Urban League and other partners of saying it is my goal to work myself out of a job or a consulting relationship with them or partnership, because I do really want them to be able to do these projects on their own. I'd love to stay in the deals with them if they want me to, but a lot of like the Blueprint, for example, it's structured where Amazon was a funder on that, so that's a 20-year loan. We're partners for 20 years, and at the end of that 20 years, the Urban League we'll just transfer our interest to Urban League. So they don't need to buy us our 50% out, because that would just defeat the purpose of affordability. We are just going to say, here you go, if you want. If you want me to stick around, that's great. Who knows what's going to be happening in 20 years. But that's our approach to these deals, is to really get them teed up, stabilized, de-risk them, and then to also, during that process, learn, build capacity, learn how the buildings operate, and then have those nonprofits own those assets in perpetuity. So I guess that's where I'll stop there for now for questions, but that's kind of my perspective on it.
Thank you. All right, I want to thank the panelists for following very strict instructions from me about how long they were allowed to take, because I did want to leave the bulk of the time for all of your questions. So feel free to raise your hand. Maybe you can hand, that microphone down to Hallie, who's going to walk around if you'd like to ask a question. There's one that was posted in the chat. Well, I also wanted to say I did a poll, and some of you answered it, and it looks like we've got quite a few what I have termed experienced developers, meaning you've done 3 or more publicly funded deals. And then we've got another set of folks in the room who are emerging developers, meaning they've done 2 or fewer publicly funded deals. And so that's kind of the audience that we're looking at. The question that I had that was also echoed in the chat for Jonathan and Connor: what lessons have you as experienced developers learned when partnering with emerging developers, and what would you do differently if you could go back in time?
That's a good one. You don't even want that,
huh? Lessons learned. I think I've only been in this for-profit world for 3 years, and really the first year was just kind of like getting my bearings. So, I'm in this weird place of understanding the nonprofit world, not necessarily understanding the for-profit world, and learning about risk and learning about when things can go wrong and what needs to happen. And so it's not necessarily, so I guess my perspective is I've been in those nonprofit shoes, and so I understand those, the process of nonprofit development. And I'm trying to bridge between my for-profit partners who have no idea about affordable housing, but I need them for their financial support, and then also with my nonprofit lens of how we marry these two. So, so I guess that's what I've learned about risk and guarantees and all that fun stuff. What would I do different? I don't know if at this point, I think I'm actually very proud of where I've gotten to this point, and the partners that we have, and the dynamics that we have. I think that we have very fulfilling partnerships. I think they're very balanced, and the value exchange is equal there for what everybody is kind of getting out of it. But I think, like Patrick said, it is about listening. It is recognizing that I'm not the best person to design a building and program a building for communities that I don't necessarily represent. So it's about bringing a partner in and really giving them the stage or the platform to really insert their opinions and preferences and going with that. I mean, I think that's very important. And so I view myself as more of a facilitator than somebody who knows what's best.
I'm sure we have just so much more to learn, but some of the highlights that come to mind are that, and we've already mentioned listening is really important, but I think we have inadvertently probably put Chauncey into uncomfortable positions with his board and with his community, one with, going out and getting a CDBG grant and building, smacking on a few new units to a ACK rehab we are doing, might not feel like a big deal to us, that risk. We're familiar with it. We're comfortable with the implications of that. And we kind of get ahead, I think, sometimes in our efforts to add value to the project, to find a path forward, but need to spend more time working to understand and hear and talk through the considerations and the impacts that it has. And Chauncey is always very gracious about it and manages it really well. But there's been a couple times like, hey guys, I've got to go talk to my bosses, and you need to explain a little more what and why we're doing this. So I think that's one thing I would call out, not related to our partnership with Chauncey, but we have another partnership with the Saylor School of Spokane, different cultural considerations there. The speed of decision making, and for us to build in and be comfortable and recognize that our speed of decision making is not how it's going to be and not how it should be, that there is more process. I think we have really needed, and we need to get better at building back a timeline and a process and understanding that matches the speed of the partner that we're working with, and not to assume or hold them unreasonably to this idea that you have to make decisions the way we do. So
That's great. It's something for public funders to keep in mind too. Another question that I want to direct toward Chauncey and Mansoor: how would you recommend an individual or group of individuals in the industry get started with developing affordable housing communities? You talked a little bit, Chauncey, about how you got started, kind of kicking and screaming, it sounds like, into the nonprofit world. Do you have any advice for those who are maybe where you were 4 years ago?
So the first thing you have to do is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that, one of the things that we didn't have up there was our first true collaboration, which was a transfer, right, from the East Central Community Organization that was going to, it was a strong-rooted organization that was going away. So they had an RFP out, right? And so this is another lesson, too, is Jonathan's network and Catholic Charities network doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Chauncey's and Take Up the Cause's network, right? So through a collaboration, I went and sat down with one of the board members and expressed interest in this transfer and in acquiring our first 33 units. And the person told me, "You weren't invited to apply for this RFP. How'd you even get it?" "Oh, this what we doing, bruh?" Okay. So when I said, so this is like the Kevin Hart my mama told me to tell you. I said, Jonathan and Catholic Charities told me to come down here and tell y'all that they got my back when it comes to this. And then he was like, have Jonathan send me an email and then we might open it up for you. Okay. So like, okay, play a little game. Jonathan, I text him. He sent the email 2 minutes later. 5 minutes later, I got the request for proposal. Now, was that uncomfortable for me? Yeah. Was it necessary? Yeah. That dude still sits on my board to this day, right? I'm like, I'm taking you with me. So you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then know that you're there for a reason and you bring value. I was talking to someone yesterday, Maureen, and don't ever minimize what you're doing, saying only or my little, right? Don't you dare show up. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? People died for you to be able to present in your authentic self. So show up in that way. Please don't have any of that I don't belong in this room. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, but also know that that's not going to stop because you got 1 or 2 deals under your belt. As the rooms get bigger, you're going to get more uncomfortable, but the money gets a little larger, right? So when we go after this $10.8 million collaboration, and then an organization, it's like, oh, you can tell Commerce, anybody from Commerce in here? I love y'all. It's like, oh, you can talk to Commerce and they can, you don't have to do the, right? And he's like, Chance, this Jonathan told me, y'all got to start coming from a position of power. Now that's foreign to us, right? We've been fighting for crumbs for so much. So be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Please know that you belong in these rooms and be willing to put in the work, I think, and then get it aligned, have a strong board, all of those things, you know those. But those are some of the things I say, don't stop. When someone closes the door, just go through the window.
So I would say I have 3 main advices for a nonprofit that wants to do this type of job. One is to make sure that you have your board involvement in the initial stage, because every single deal would need a board resolution for you to move forward. And also have a leadership that is basically committed to this cause, because you need to have your leaders of the nonprofit review the deals and be comfortable with the deals. And the third one is to make sure you know your leverage and you know the value that you're bringing, and to be able to assess the risk for the for-profit partner and the risk of the nonprofit partner. And that's where for example, capacity building comes into place. Having the asset manager, for example, to make sure that you're in compliance is very important in doing this type of deals, because there's a lot of risk and it's a lot of money.
Okay. Anybody out here got some questions? Yeah, go ahead. Speak up so we don't have to reach you with the mic. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Eric.
That's okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here and investing in this effort, personally and professionally. Appreciate that. And like Mansour says, you know, he wants to work himself out of a job, so we're going to do everything we can to support that happening. Chauncey said it, there are levels to this. In terms of those levels, what level of visibility into, once the deal is executed and all the financing is in place, I mean, you can have anywhere from a $10 million to a $200 million project drop into a community, and you have professionals of every industry partaking in themselves of that project. What level of visibility do you have into the construction side of things, the vertically integrated companies to level up to what Chauncey said? There are vertical integrations where companies do all of that. They do the construction, they do the development. That's a generation, next generation. What level of visibility does the SRMs and some of these other partners provide with regard to support? So in 10 or 20 years, we can have that vertical integration and do everything in-house and build that generational wealth at an elevated level. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. When we struck up a partnership with Urban League, a diverse project team was one of the requirements, was one of the objectives. And so that forced, that encouraged SRM to start to seek out different subcontractors that maybe we're not used to working with. For example, on the project we have under construction in North Seattle at the moment, 20% of our subcontractors are women or minority-owned business, where I would argue that we didn't do that before we partnered with Urban League. And that was for the Empowerment Center, we're even trying to up that a little bit even more. It's really about putting it out there and trying to qualify folks, and even sometimes we're paying a little bit more for that trade just to help support that goal. I'll also say, we have weekly meetings, Urban League and SRM, with all the projects we have going on every Monday at 3 o'clock. And so there's always just an ongoing conversation about what we're doing, and they have access to everything that we are doing. And we're trying to, our construction team specifically is trying to encourage, because this is one of our industry's problems, is the aging workforce. So we're trying to create leverage. This is a value that the Urban League is bringing, leveraging their network to encourage folks coming up in high school or whatever to understand the construction trades and say this is a really good career, and give them those opportunities to learn the business. So we're sponsoring students to learn the business through a couple different Project Destinies. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but we're sponsoring some kids going through that program. And just trying to make ourselves accessible and get into the business, because it is important. My personal motivation in this business is it's really for the kids, to like get kids an opportunity. I don't view affordable housing as a forever, like that's where you go, and affordable housing is what you live in forever. I view it as a bridge to something else. So that's my mentality, and trying to just provide access. I mean, we talked about networks. I recognize I might have a different network than Urban League, and I think they have a different network that I do that I could benefit from. So it's just providing that exposure and access.
Thank you.
So Rita Shaver, Okanagan County Community Action. I'm with Okanagan County Community Action. We're an emerging new developer. We haven't done a project before. Office of Rural and Farm Worker Housing is our developer. And we have partnered with the Colville Indian Housing Authority for our liquidity. So our project is 72 units. It'll be a LIHTC project. And one of the things that we're competing against Jonathan actually is for vouchers in our community. So my question has to do with, how do we better secure vouchers? Those have to come from our housing authorities, not from our nonprofits. And what are we doing about the increasing liability insurance that I'm hearing? Catholic Charities, I know, has been very open and honest about what that's costing them, and that scares the heck out of me as an emerging developer.
Yeah, maybe I could. And one, I hope we're not in competition, that we can build up the housing authority to have the capacity to support both of our projects. So let's work together on that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, fundamentally, this is the biggest challenge I think affordable housing in Washington faces, is that and I've used some specific numbers here. In the last 5 years, Catholic Charities' expenses of operating our housing have increased by 35.3%. The maximum gross rent we could receive has increased about 9.1%. During the pandemic, in a time where our accounts receivable, the amount of rent that we have charged but is owed to us, has gone from an average about 1.5% to floating around 9%. So our gross revenue potential has gone up by less than our expenses have gone up by a large margin, and our actual rent collection has gone down because people are making very rational decisions to meet other needs in their life as their budgets have been constrained, and to put off paying for housing because the consequences of that are further down the road. So I don't mean to criticize our residents. They're dealing with these real challenges. But then those are our challenges too. So I don't have the silver bullet answer for you, but we need to collaborate with policymakers. We need to collaborate with resident and tenant advocacy organizations and say, this is a problem that's going to affect all of us. Let's figure out a path forward. So I'll pause there. No good answer, but that's the problem.
Yeah, I think this room needs to come together on that.
Any other I have maybe time for one last question. Yeah, back in the back next to Eric.
My name's Shannon. I'm with the Delridge Neighborhood Development Association. And Chauncey and Mansour, you both spoke to an issue that I think our org faces, where our board consists of like 2 people that understand housing, right? So I'm looking at LISC and I'm wondering, how do we bring our boards into this environment where we can actually work to steward the organization in a way that is responsible, minimizes risk, and do it in a timeline that is fast enough for our executive director?
That's a good question. I'm going to add that to our one-on-ones, Misha. But I mean, that's the challenge, right? We're doing this work with other organizations. I mean, you have to start with saying it and think, like, visualizing what kind of board do you want, what is their role, defining that, and then recruiting around that, utilizing your connections to build that. because it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, this is kind of, it speaks to the speed of the decision-making process and the challenges around that. Not only is it taking the time to build the trust, it's taking the time to build the infrastructure of the organization. And it's not just board, it could be like setting up your financials and all the things that you need to have in line as part of your loan package for underwriting. And so, again, not a silver bullet to do that, but that's what we're here for, to help you think through all those steps that you need as an organization, not even just your project, but like to help you build the foundation in your project so that you can do housing. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I'd add to that. I think when we are working with community-based organizations to help them understand affordable housing so that they can sit in a position of power in that relationship when they do partner, it's helping them understand, you do need to build up your board with people who understand, if not specifically affordable housing, individual aspects of the work that you're engaging in. Because if we just keep all of our boards only affordable housing people, that's not going to be a sustainable model. But I think having people who understand finance, people who understand legal issues, right? That's where our hope with the training is that the leaders of these organizations start to understand, okay, I need these 10 things, it's probably more like 100, but to be able to sit at that table, be in a position of power in that relationship, have an understanding and a clear ability to engage in those conversations. And I need to build up my board, and I need to work on my balance sheet, and there's so many things, right? So I think it's helping organizations build that capacity is part of what we're trying to do as we move forward, and then we get the result, not of necessarily our trainings, but work that is really wonderfully shown here of these partnerships where you also have a committed partner in the developer who is willing to share that knowledge and that experience to be able to help you move forward as you grow. Carrie's taking the mic away.
Shannon, we should talk about that.
I was going to try to put back up the last slide that has our contact info, because clearly this is a conversation that might need to continue, but it seemed like the slideshow is gone. So please feel free to come up. That's the end of the time that we had. It was way too short, as I knew it would be, but I've got to let you go for lunch. But yeah, I think our panelists have availed themselves to you for further questions. You can ask them in the Whova app, and I'll try to answer them individually, even though the session is over. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and let's get another round for our panel here.